Welcome back, historians. China rebuilds its empire. China's Han Empire ended in AD 220. For the next 300 years, Chinese warlords fought with each other. China finally unified again under a general named Wendi. He set up a new dynasty called the Sui, in which emperors ruled. After Wendi died, his son Yangdi became emperor. Yangdi rebuilt the Great Wall. Yangdi's biggest accomplishment, however, was building the Grand Canal. The Grand Canal was used to ship products between northern and southern China. It helped make China's economy stronger. Yangdi made life very hard for the Chinese people, however. He made farmers work on the Great Wall and the Grand Canal. The people also had to pay for these projects with high taxes. The farmers became so angry that they killed Yangdi. When Yangdi died, the Sui dynasty ended. In AD 618, one of Yangdi's generals made himself emperor. He set up a new dynasty called the Tang. The most powerful Tang emperor was Taizong. He went back to using special tests called civil service examinations for choosing government officials. Taizong also gave land to farmers and brought order to the countryside. During the late AD 600s, a woman named Wu became the only woman in Chinese history to rule the country on her own. As a strong leader, Empress Wu made the government bigger. She also made the military stronger. China grew strong again under the Tang. In the mid-AD 700s, however, the Tang dynasty began to have problems. A new group of wandering people took control of Central Asia and the Silk Road, an important trade route. Chinese farmers and people in Tibet also rose up against the Tang. The dynasty ended in AD 907. Eventually, a general named Song made himself emperor. The Song dynasty was a time of great wealth and rich culture, but Song rulers did not have enough soldiers to control their large empire. Nomads took over land in northern China. The Song moved their capital south to the city of Hangzhou for safety. Buddhism in China. Traders and missionaries from India had brought Buddhism to China in about AD 150. A short time later, a civil war started. Many people suffered greatly. Buddhism taught that people could escape their suffering. Many Chinese who were looking for peace and comfort became Buddhists. Early Tang rulers were not Buddhists, but they allowed people to practice Buddhism and build Buddhist temples. Many Chinese Buddhist nuns and monks ran schools. They also provided rooms and food for travelers. Buddhist monks served as bankers and gave medical care. Some Chinese did not like Buddhism. Many thought the monasteries were gaining too much wealth. Others thought that monks and nuns did not encourage respect for families because they did not marry. In AD 845, the Tang destroyed many Buddhist monasteries and temples. Buddhism in China would never be the same. Korea broke free from China when the Han dynasty fell. Chinese Buddhists brought their religion to Korea. In about AD 660, the Koreans came together to form one country. The new government supported Buddhism in Korea and even spread to the islands of Japan. Revival of Confucian ideas. Confucius and his followers believed that a good government depended on wise leaders. The Tang dynasty supported Neo-Confucianism, a new kind of Confucianism. It taught that life in this world was just as important as life in the next one. Neo-Confucianism became more than a list of rules. It became a religion. Neo-Confucianism also helped make the government stronger. In the past, jobs had been given to people because of their wealth, family, or friends. Now the government hired people based on their knowledge and ability to think. People taking civil service examinations had to show how much they knew about Confucian writings. Only men could take the tests, and only rich people had enough money to help their sons study for the tests. It took years of study and only 1 out of every 5 men passed. Those who failed could become teachers, but they could never get a government job. Economic growth. China's economy suffered when the Han dynasty ended in the AD 200s. Widespread fighting ruined cities and farms. People had little food and few goods to trade. The Tang rulers took power in AD 618. They brought peace to the countryside and gave more land to farmers. This allowed farmers to improve ways of watering and growing crops. They also grew new kinds of rice. Because farmers produced more food, the number of people in China grew. People moved to new areas. Farmers moved south where they could grow even more rice. Tang rulers built roads and waterways. Travel inside and outside of China became easier. Merchants could trade with people in other parts of Asia and the world. They traded silk fabric, tea, steel, paper, and porcelain. Porcelain is a kind of pottery made of fine clay and baked at high temperatures. For these Chinese products, other countries traded gold, silver, precious stones, and fine woods. Technological advances. During the Tang and Song dynasties, people made new discoveries and inventions that changed life in China. These developments soon would spread to other parts of the world. For a long time, people burned wood to keep warm and cook food. Eventually, too many trees were cut down and wood was hard to get. The Chinese then learned that coal could be burned to heat things. When heated in a furnace, the melted iron mixed with carbon from the coal. It became a new, stronger metal known as steel. The Chinese made strong armor, swords, and helmets for their army with steel. They also used steel to make stoves, farm tools, drills, nails, and sewing needles. These changes made the army stronger and helped workers do more work. The Chinese found a way to print books. Before this, people had to copy books by hand. This was expensive, so few books were made. The Chinese cut the characters of an entire page onto a block of wood. Then they put ink on the wood block and pressed a piece of paper on top of it to print a page. Cutting a block took a long time. Once it was cut, however, it could be used to make many copies. The first known printed book is from about AD 868. Printing made it easier to make books. However, once a block was carved, changes could not be made. In the AD 1000s, a Chinese printer named Pai Sheng invented a new way to print. He used movable type. This meant that each character, instead of each page, was a separate piece, made of clay. These pieces could be moved around to make sentences. Pieces could be used again and again. Printing also led to another Chinese invention, paper money. Paper money helped the economy grow. The Chinese made gunpowder for use in weapons and fireworks. One weapon was the fire lance. It was like an early gun. It helped make the Chinese army a strong force. The Chinese also built large ships with sails and rudders for steering. Chinese sailors also began using the magnetic compass to help them find their way. The compass allowed ships to sail farther from land. Literature and the arts. The years of the Tang and Song dynasties were some of the best for Chinese culture. That is why those years are called a golden age. Chinese rulers supported art and literature. They invited artists and poets to live and work in the capital city of Chang'an. The Tang dynasty was the great age of poetry in China. Chinese poetry often showed an appreciation of the world. Li Bo was one of the most popular Tang poets. He wrote about nature. For years, the Chinese have studied and memorized his poems. Another favorite Tang poet was Du Fu. Civil war in China made life hard. Food was difficult to find. Du Fu almost died of hunger. These experiences helped him see the suffering of people. Du Fu often wrote about the unfairness of life for the poor and the wastefulness of war. During the Song dynasty, Chinese artists painted large nature scenes called landscapes. These paintings were not realistic. Instead, they showed the power of the mountains and lakes. As a result, people appeared to be small in the paintings, much smaller than the nature around them. Chinese painters often wrote poetry on their works. They used a brush and ink to write beautiful characters called calligraphy. During the Tang period, Chinese artisans, or skilled workers, made very fine porcelain. Because porcelain comes from China, people around the world call it by the name China. Porcelain can be made into plates, cups, figurines, and vases. Mongol expansion. The Mongols lived in an area north of China called Mongolia. They lived in clans, or groups of loosely related families. The Mongols raised sheep, horses, and yaks, a kind of long-haired oxen. They moved as the animals fed on Mongolia's great steppes. Steppes are wide, grassy lands. The Mongols were excellent horseback riders and skilled fighters. Mongol leaders came together in AD 1206 in the Gobi, a desert covering parts of Mongolia and China. At that meeting, they elected a young warrior named Temujin to be Genghis Khan, which means strong ruler. Genghis Khan brought the clans together and organized the Mongols into a strong army. He chose leaders for their skills, not for their family ties. Each time he won a battle, he gained wealth and new soldiers. Soon the Mongols were strong enough to attack big civilizations. In AD 1211 the Mongols invaded China. In 3 years, they took control of northern China. Then they moved west to attack cities and kingdoms that controlled parts of the Silk Road. Genghis Khan and his Mongol fighters used terror to scare their enemies into giving up. They attacked, robbed, and burned cities. Soon, many people gave in to them without fighting. Genghis Khan died in AD 1227. His territory was split among his sons. Each one ruled a different area. The sons continued to make the empire bigger. The Mongols moved into parts of Eastern and Central Europe. They also took over Persia in Southwest Asia. The Mongols brought all of these lands together under their rule. The empire reached from the Pacific Ocean in the east to Eastern Europe in the west. It reached from Siberia in the north to the Himalaya in the south. It was the largest land empire ever created. The Mongols brought peace to their lands. Peace was good for trade, and the Mongols now had control of many of Asia's trade routes. They gained great wealth by taxing the goods that were traded. The Mongols had great respect for the cultures they now ruled. Sometimes they took on the beliefs and customs of the people. For example, the Mongols in Southwest Asia accepted Islam. The Mongols also learned from their enemy, the Chinese. They learned about gunpowder and the fire lance and began to use them. With these new weapons, their enemies were even more afraid of the Mongols. Mongol conquest of China. In AD 1260, Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai Khan, became ruler. Kublai Khan took over more of China. Kublai moved his capital from Karakoram in Mongolia to Khanbaliq in northern China. Today, the city of Beijing stands in the same place. In AD 1279, Kublai Khan made himself China's new emperor and started the Yuan dynasty. Yuan means beginning. However, the Yuan dynasty lasted for only about 100 years. Kublai Khan ruled for 30 of those years. The Yuan rulers stopped using the civil service examinations for government jobs. They let non-Chinese work in the government. The Mongol and Chinese cultures were different in many ways. The Mongols had their own language, laws, and customs. This separated them from the Chinese people they ruled. The two groups lived apart and did not mix socially. Many Mongols were Buddhists, but they respected other religions. For example, Kublai Khan allowed Christians, Muslims, and Hindus to practice their faiths. China reached its greatest wealth and power under Mongol rule. People from other countries were attracted to China. These visitors traveled the Silk Road to get there. A famous European traveler who came to China was Marco Polo. He was from Italy. The capital city of Khanbaliq impressed Polo with its wide streets, beautiful palaces, and nice homes. Kublai Khan liked the stories Polo told about his travels. For many years, Kublai Khan sent Polo on trips to gather information. When Polo went back to Europe, he wrote a book about his adventures. His stories of China amazed Europeans. The Mongols ruled a large empire, from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe. China grew wealthy from being able to trade with many parts of the world. The Chinese traded tea, silk, and porcelain for silver, spices, carpets, and cotton from Europe and other parts of Asia. Europeans and Muslims took Chinese discoveries like steel, gunpowder, and the compass back to their homes. The Mongols made China's empire larger. They took over Vietnam and northern Korea. The Koryo rulers of Korea were allowed to stay in power because they accepted Mongol rule. The Mongols forced the Koreans to build warships. The Mongols tried to use these ships 2 times to take over Japan. Both times, huge storms destroyed the Mongol fleet. The Ming dynasty. Kublai Khan died in AD 1294. The weak Mongol emperors who followed him began to lose power. At the same time, the Chinese wanted to rule themselves. The Chinese fought against Mongol control and won. In AD 1368, a leader named Zhu Yuanzhang became emperor. He took the name Hongwu, or military emperor. Hongwu set up his capital at Nanjing. He started the Ming, or brilliant, dynasty. Hongwu brought back order, yet he was also a cruel leader. Hongwu's son became emperor in AD 1398. He took the name Yongle. To show his power as emperor, Yongle moved the capital north to Beijing. He built a large area of palaces and government buildings. This area was called the Imperial City. The middle of the Imperial City was known as the Forbidden City. This is where the emperors and their families lived for more than 500 years. The Forbidden City had beautiful gardens and many palaces. You can visit the Forbidden City today if you go to China. Ming emperors brought back the tests for government jobs. They made the tests very hard. It took years to prepare for the tests. One job that officials did was taking a census, or a count of the number of people in China. This helped them collect the correct amount of taxes. The Chinese economy began to grow under the Ming government. New roads were built and new forests were planted. Farmers were given more land to grow crops. Ming rulers repaired the Grand Canal and made it bigger. Rice and other goods could again be shipped throughout China. Farmers planted new types of rice that grew faster. More food could be sent to the growing number of people living in cities. Ming rulers also helped the silk industry. Chinese culture grew under the Ming. Traders and skilled workers became wealthy. They wanted to be entertained and now could pay for it. During the Ming period, Chinese writers wrote many novels, or long, made-up stories. The Chinese also liked seeing dramas on stage. Actors used words, songs, dances, and costumes to perform stories. Chinese exploration. Early Ming emperors were curious about the world outside of China. So they built a large group of ships to sail along China's coast and on the open sea to other countries. From AD 1405 to 1431, Ming emperors sent the ships on 7 trips. They wanted to trade with other kingdoms. They also wanted other rulers to see China's power and make weaker kingdoms pay money to China. A Chinese Muslim named Zheng He led these trips. He was also known as Chongho. Zheng He took his first ships to Southeast Asia. Later, he went to India and East Africa. Zheng He traded Chinese silk, paper, and porcelain. He brought back items the Chinese had never seen. For example, he brought giraffes and other animals from Africa for the emperor's zoo. After these trips, Chinese merchants settled in Southeast Asia and India. They traded goods there and spread Chinese culture. Merchants earned a lot of money and added to China's wealth. Many good things came from these trips, yet people in the Chinese government thought the trips cost too much. They also said that the trips were bad for China because they would bring unwanted ideas from the outside world and help merchants become rich. This went against the teachings of Confucius. He taught that people's desires should come after loyalty to their community. Officials believed that rich people were only concerned with themselves. After the death of Zheng He, government officials stopped the trips. No more ships were built. Existing ships were even taken apart. As a result, China's trade with other countries decreased. Ming officials were not able to cut off China from the outside world for good. In AD 1514, ships from the European country of Portugal came to China. It was the first direct contact between China and Europe since the time of Marco Polo. The Portuguese wanted China to trade with them. They also wanted the Chinese to become Christians. China's rulers did not think that the outsiders were a threat. In fact, the Chinese thought the Europeans were barbarians, or uncivilized people. At first, the Chinese said they would not trade with the Portuguese. By AD 1600, however, Portugal had built a trading post. Still, trade between China and Europe was limited. Even with little contact, ideas from Europe came to China. Highly educated Christian missionaries arrived on European ships. Their knowledge of science impressed the Chinese. However, not many Chinese became Christians. After many years of wealth and growth, the Ming dynasty became weak. Dishonest officials took over the country. They made farmers pay high taxes. The farmers revolted. Without law and order, people from north of China attacked. These people, called the Manchus, defeated the Chinese armies. In AD 1644, they set up a new dynasty,